One of the most intuitive and sometimes one of the most fun color adjustment tools that you can use is color balance. So let's take a look at how we can use color balance on a few images in order to change or modify the colors in our photographs. Here we have a family portrait down at a beach, and what I want to do is warm this image up. To do that, we'll use color balance. You can click on the color balance icon right here. You can find it in the adjustments panel. And on this first image, we'll keep things pretty simple. All that I want to do is drag my slider to the right in order to increase the reds. I also want to increase the yellows. The reason why I said this is intuitive is because it's color-coded. So here we can see as we drag this towards that color, the image takes on more of that color characteristic. If we want a little bit more magenta, we can add a touch more of that as well. So far, here we have our before and then now our after. Much nicer color in the photograph. Yet we can also dig deeper into these controls. Here we can work on the shadows. If we click shadows, this allows us to make color adjustments in the darker areas of the photograph. Again, we can cool those off or warm those up. And as you make these adjustments, often what you can do is you can go through and you can stack up the adjustments so that you can focus on the shadows differently than the midtones or the highlights. Here in the shadows, I might just bring up my reds a little bit and bring down the magentas and yellows a touch as well. Let's compare that, say, to the midtones. Well, the midtones, we have completely different amounts. And the same thing could be said for going to the highlights. And by working on these different areas, we can start to really fine-tune exactly how we want these colors to appear. And we can use these sliders to enhance color like we're doing here, or to create really vivid and surreal colors. You can make really strong adjustments by dragging these sliders really far to either side of the spectrum, or you can just make little teeny adjustments as well. With this photograph, I think it's better to make a bit more subtle so that here's our before, and then click on the eye icon again, and we can see here's the after. It just looks more warm and inviting. All right, well, let's take a look at making more vivid colors using color balance. To do that, I'll open up a photograph of a sunrise. The color in this image is a little bit lackluster. So let's boost the color by opening up color balance. Here, we'll start off in the shadows, the darker tones. There are a lot of those in this photograph. We can change the characteristic of the image by making the darker tones much more blue and cyan. If you don't like the mix of the blue and the cyan together, we'll just add a little bit of magenta. In this case, you can see I can make it more of a true blue color. So we could have these deep dark blues. Then we could go to the highlights. And in the highlights, we could warm everything up, add more yellows and reds and maybe even some magenta. And here, all of a sudden, we have a completely different look. Here's before, and then now here's after. Well, with this look, while it's different, I don't necessarily like it, so I'll reset it. Click on the reset icon. What else could we do with this image? Well, here, one of the things that we could do is we could increase our overall color, say, by bringing up our reds and our magentas and our yellows. And let's say that actually what we want is a sunset which has these bright, vivid colors and it has a bit more brightness to it. So here in my midtones, I brought up my reds, brought down the magentas, and ended up bringing up the blues a little bit as well. Next, I'll go into the shadows. In the shadows, again, I want more red in that area. And then I'll also just bring out the magenta and the yellow characteristics. Here I'm looking to try to create really vivid, dynamic look to this photograph. Last but not least, we'll travel to the highlights. And here in the highlights, we can control the colors that we have in the brighter tones of the image. And sometimes it's fun just to slide these colors around and see what the photograph might look like. All right, well, there you have it. Another way that we could modify the color in this image, which was completely different than before. Here's our before, and then now here's our after.